I am Nick Powell, City Hall Bureau Chief with City and State. Joining me on today's City and State TV is Nancy Biberman, the president and founder of the Women's Housing and Economic Development Corporation. Thanks for joining us today, Nancy.
Thanks for having me.
So we're anxiously awaiting the mayor's affordable housing plan. He has promised to create or preserve 200,000 units of affordable housing. Now, when we talk about affordable, and I've written a piece to this extent recently, but how do we define affordability? Because it seems like, judging by the two housing deals that have been cut so far in the de Blasio administration, they've been a little bit different in how they're constructed. So can you talk a little bit about how we define affordability today?
Well, that's a good question, and that's actually is one of the threshold issues that we're going to be looking for when the mayor's plan comes out. We applaud the mayor for making sure that affordable housing is a priority and that it's clearly a component of how he plans to look at inequality in New York City more broadly. But what's affordable citywide and what's affordable in a low-income community are two very, very different things. So typically the standard for affordability is 60% of the area median income. So if you look at the New York City citywide, it would be somewhere between $50,000 and $67,000. That's what 60% of AMI is. But if you look at a community like the Bronx, the South Bronx, 60% of AMI is more like $34,000. So much of the affordable housing that's been built in years past has been unaffordable to the people who need it the most.
And so I wanted to ask you about area median income. I know a lot of legislators have taken issue with using that as the sole metric to define affordability. Is that measure flawed because it takes into such a wide range of incomes throughout the city, or how do you feel about using that?
I don't think it was flawed at its inception, at the creation, but I think that since the city has become, not only more unaffordable, but the incomes have become so high in certain areas and so low in other areas that it has over time become an inadequate, I think, metric. Right. Of gauging what is truly affordable. And I think we do have to look a little more hyper-locally at affordability.
Now, I know another factor is cost of living in certain neighborhoods, right? So if there's an affordable housing development on the west side of Manhattan, for instance, for the people who would be in those affordable units, the area surrounding it, if you want to go grocery shopping, might be way more expensive than you would find in the outer boroughs. So when we talk about new developments, does this cost of living in certain neighborhoods come into play?
It doesn't, and I think that ironically, the cost of living in lower income communities can actually be higher. When there are fewer options for shopping, for example, as there are in most low income communities, just retail, supermarkets. There aren't enough supermarkets, and so bodega owners can charge whatever they can get because there's no competition. So I actually think that, that there is much less in the way of groceries and other, items that people need for day-to-day living. It is much less affordable because there's less competition in lower income neighborhoods.
Interesting. Now, when we're talking about the mayor's plan, 200,000 units is a nice round number. It's more than the 165,000 roughly that the Bloomberg administration preserved and or created. What should we be looking for with this plan? I know you've advocated taking a holistic approach to this plan. What exactly does that mean?
So I think that, to put it in context, we really have to look at what's happened, in the last 15 years in New York City, which is not a very long period of time. I mean, we're talking about rents that have increased by 75% over the last 15 years at a time when wages are, not only stagnating but going down. So, the crisis is very real. I don't have to talk about how many homeless families, the highest number of homeless families. There's a real crisis. And I think one of the key elements of affordability is ensuring permanent affordability, that it's not just affordable for a 30-year period, which really has us, for a development that's built in 1970 or 1980 or 1990. You've got these things sunsetting every 30 years. So what we're doing is running hard in the development side just to stay in place. There has to be an end to the sunsetting of subsidized housing, whether it's subsidized through tax breaks or zoning variances or whatever. The city's giving away a lot and has given away a lot historically. And in exchange for these benefits, there really does need to be sustained permanent affordability so that we don't keep losing units. And we are losing, rent-regulated units at an alarming pace every year, even as there are new affordable housing developments created. So we are not making any real progress. There's really no net gain that we've seen in affordability in New York City in spite of all the efforts. So permanency is a really key component. Another key component is creating communities, not simply thinking about affordable housing as being sort of like an economic development panacea. It could be an economic development panacea if affordable housing also were part of mixed-use developments that provided other benefits to community residents. So having more retail, having a greengrocer that sells affordable produce. Cost of living can go up and down depending on, as I said earlier, the available options for people to buy things that they need on a day-to-day basis. And, we need to create communities that where people have the capacity to earn a living wage. So a mixed-use development, with retail, with the cultural center, with places for people to shop and hang out and do all the nice things that everybody wants to be able to do in their neighborhoods. This requires some thinking, requires planning, requires community input, and requires using the dollars that we have and that we, get in affordable housing development for multiple purposes, all of which, are intended and designed to stabilize families.
Right. Now, to that end, how would you evaluate Bloomberg's new housing marketplace plan in kind of taking that holistic view that you were talking about?
I think that the affordability was skewed too high. Going back to the AMI issue, I think we really do have to be looking at a lower area median income than the citywide area median income. There were sunsetting provisions for affordability in every one of the deals. And, we really didn't see in the high-end market rate developments anywhere near significant set-aside of affordable units. So I think what happens to neighborhoods, when you don't see, benefits accruing to working families, middle-income families, and only, accruing to, the upper-income families who get the tall buildings with the breathtaking views, you wind up seeing income-segregated neighborhoods that are not healthy for anybody and are really not emblematic of why people were attracted to New York as a place to live in the first instance.
Sure. And I understand your foundation, your organization has done some work in the South Bronx. Could you talk a little bit about what you've done there and how you've kind of put your plan for a holistic approach to use?
Well, first and foremost, our developments are affordable, and I think that's one of the benefits of having nonprofits really taking the lead in developing affordable housing. And I hope and expect, actually, that this will be a signature element of the mayor's plan, is really putting nonprofits who are grounded in the community, who have no problem with the notion of permanent affordability, and who see affordability and affordable housing as a place where many things can happen, where you can have mixed uses, all of which can benefit a neighborhood. So, for example, in one of our buildings, we have a commercial kitchen that's an incubator for small businesses, and we've launched countless small food businesses over the last more than a decade. We have a Head Start Center in one building. We have a primary health care facility in one building. We have a small cultural institution in another building called the Bronx Music Heritage Center. We have a training center where we work with women who want to become home-based child care providers to help them learn how to set up small businesses and provide quality care. And I think the last thing that's critically important is we build sustainably. And if that is another really key element in affordability. I mean, just because one dictates permanent affordability doesn't mean that the cost of fuel is going to stay flat.
Sure.
You know, costs do rise over which we have little control, but in fact we do have control over how we build. And if we build green, for all the reasons that related to the climate and our survival as humans on this planet is the right thing to do, we will be able to bring down costs, create healthier neighborhoods, create green jobs. There are many, many positive things that come out of building green when you have the opportunity to build from scratch, or retrofitting a building that was an old building that was not built green. And we've done both, and they are doable, they are scalable. The technology, the interest, the industry exists in New York City, and affordable housing and green building really should become synonymous.
Right. Nancy Biberman, the president and founder of the Women's Housing and Economic Development Corporation. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.